After George Floyd's murder, Willie Halliburton almost retired from policing.
Things have to change.
Instead, he became PSU's chief of police and then decided to disarm the whole force.
Because there's so many people who are not treated fairly out there.
What he has planned, why he stayed on, and how the show Cops is the reason he's in Portland to begin with. And what's it like to be directly targeted by one of President Trump's tweets? Now, I don't know personally, but today, Governor Brown and Mayor Wheeler know. And speaking of the mayor, he finally sat down for a one-on-one interview, just not with us. But we did talk to the OPB reporter that finally got some of the mayor's time.
I was like, hey, I really want to talk about this.
Here's the story. All right, hello, I'm Dan Haggerty. Welcome to The Story. So, do all police need guns? Don't answer that right away. We're going to have a lot of news stuff to talk about first. But when you are ready, when you have an opinion, you have something to say, you can easily find me on Facebook at Dan Haggerty KGW. You can find The Story on Instagram or use email. Find us at thestory@kgw.com or Twitter and that hashtag HeyDan. All right, let's get to that news stuff now. And before we do jump into the big story, I want to talk about an email that we received from David Griffiths. Here it is. It says, is anyone from KGW ever going to demand that Governor Kate Brown speak as to why the violence is allowed night after night in Portland? Isn't the media's job to hold people's feet to the fire? Then it is your time to do your duty. Demand that Governor Brown, Congressman Blumenauer, Senator Merkley, and Congresswoman Bonamici speak out against these riots. Their silence means that they condone the behavior, and the media is doing the same thing. Come on, people, do something. David, thank you. I appreciate your passion. And I want to say first that you're right. It is our job to hold our leaders' feet to the fire. It's one of the most important things that we have to do here at The Story, or the media has to do in general. But I do want to reassure you that just because you don't see us talking about that every single night right here in front of the camera doesn't mean that it's not happening. A lot of the work is happening behind the scenes, not necessarily on TV. But I understand you might want some reassurance. So to that end, David, we forwarded your note to all of the people that you mentioned in it and asked if they would speak about the protests. We even included Senator Wyden, even though you didn't. We thought maybe you'd want him to know too. We've yet to hear from Congressman Blumenauer or Senator Merkley. Senator Wyden declined, but directed us to his remarks that he gave to Kobe TV in Medford. Congresswoman Bonamici declined, but did invite us to tag along to her upcoming visit to a local elementary school and suggested that she might answer some questions about the protest. And Governor Brown declined, but directed us to this tweet that she sent earlier this afternoon. She wrote, "Let me be clear. It's time for the violence and vandalism to end so Portland can focus on the important work to be done to achieve real change for racial justice. Those who have committed acts of violence will be held accountable. And we must work together to de-escalate the potential for confrontation by continuing to foster community conversations and utilizing trained law enforcement officers to keep the people and to keep the peace and protect free speech, not soldiers." Although, to be fair, I'm guessing, David, that Governor Brown wasn't responding to us. She was probably responding to this. This morning, President Trump tweeted, "We again request Kate Brown, the governor of Oregon, and Mayor Ted Wheeler of Portland to call up the National Guard like they should have done 3 months ago. And the federal government is ready to end this problem immediately upon your request." Although it is worth pointing out that we already tried the whole federal intervention thing, didn't we? And I don't think the protests went anywhere. So, David, this is us doing what you asked us to do, holding our leaders' feet to the fire, and we're using your own words to do that. You have an open invitation to talk with us and to make they have an open invitation, rather, to talk to us and make their positions known. We certainly hope they take us up on it. I think you do too. But President Trump didn't just name-check the governor, did he? He also name-checked Mayor Ted Wheeler as well. And David, even though you didn't put him in your email, we want you to know we're pressuring him for some answers as well. In fact, KGW emails the mayor's office every single day to try and get some time to talk with him. We had some time reserved yesterday, but they canceled. We're not exactly sure why. I'm sure they have a great reason. However, they didn't cancel on Rebecca Ellis with OPB, and her recent interview with Mayor Wheeler is really worth your time. They discussed his role as commissioner, the intense feedback he's getting from the community, and of course, police tactics. Here's some of it.
Probably noticed that they try different tactics on different nights. They've tried everything from not showing up to preemptively dispersing crowds. Mm-hmm. And some of those strategies, in my opinion, have worked well. Others have not worked well. And my expectation is the police bureau will evolve, and as they see a need for change, they'll change. And as they hear from the community, they'll take that input into account as they make those decisions. That's the job that I have. It's the job of the city council, and I expect the police bureau to also evolve as their understanding changes.
The mayor said that he believes the protests will ultimately burn themselves out, but he thinks the nonviolent protests will continue on for quite some time. I'll be honest with you, I was a little jealous of Rebecca Ellis getting that one-on-one time with the mayor, so I did the next best thing, and I interviewed her to figure out what it was like, what they discussed. We talked about how the mayor keeps up with those protests each night from his condo in the Pearl.
He basically has this police-issued radio that he says he's pretty regularly keeping on in his apartment, and that is, you know, where protesters are moving, what commands are being issued from the command center. So he's sort of keeping tabs kind of on the nightly movements through that. And then when protests wind down, he said he gets this emailed report from the command center, basically listing out like the key decisions that they made each night in bullet point form. And then he says sometimes his public safety advisor, Robert King, will weigh in. And so that's sort of how he's keeping track of the nightly movements. But he said he's not, even though he's taking all that information in, he's not like making tactical shots or decisions. That's sort of left up to the police bureau.
All right, you heard her mention Robert King there, the mayor's public safety advisor. He used to be the head of the Portland Police Association until 2018. Now, if you want to read or listen to Rebecca's entire interview, you can find it right now at opb.org. It was good journalism and really worth your time. All right, let's get to our big story tonight, and maybe one of the biggest statements made by law enforcement since the killing of George Floyd, and one that had been discussed for years, but earlier this month became official. PSU campus police will return to campus this fall, but they won't carry weapons. This is the man who made that decision. His name is Willie Halliburton, the chief of campus public safety at PSU. To say the police killing of George Floyd affected him would be an understatement. He told the Portland Tribune he almost retired because of it, but obviously he didn't. He stayed on and became chief shortly after, and I was able to talk to Chief Halliburton today about his decision and how the rank and file feel about it. And in our conversation, I got a better idea of who he was, because he wasn't always the chief. I know this show has been canceled, and think what you will about it, but without it, we probably wouldn't be talking to PSU Police Chief Willie Halliburton.
Well, I was watching Cops, and I saw this African-American officer by the name of Harry Jackson doing police work in the community, a part of the community. Everyone respected him. And I said to myself, that's the kind of police officer I want to be.
He's a man full of interesting stories like that. I mean, the guy was a stand-up comedian, a job that he does say he misses sometimes. Though something does tell me his decision to take the guns away from his officers will bring plenty of attention. Your officers, what do they carry when they go out?
Right now, we're still armed. We still carry the basic police tools. You know, we carry our sidearm, carry our non-lethal weapon, our mace, things of that nature. But in the future, the next few months, we're going to be unarmed here at PSU.
Big decision.
Huge decision.
He spent 25 plus years at PPB, then 5 years on the force at PSU, and the past 2 months as chief there, where he commands about 24 officers who patrol the PSU campus downtown. How do your officers respond to this initiative?
It's going to be a challenge. I think, first of all, they trust my vision, that's first and foremost, and they've been doing the job here. I mean, if you look at our history, use of force history, you know, we had an incredible tragedy that happened in 2018. But prior to that and after that, I mean, use of force has been at a very minimal here. They do a great job de-escalating. They do a wonderful job just being good police officers out there, de-escalating, getting to know folks, not having to rely on a weapon.
In 2018, PSU police shot and killed Jason Washington. Witnesses said that he was breaking up a fight outside of a bar when his legal firearm fell on the ground. As he reached to pick it up, officers fired. The university paid out $1 million to his family. Training has to be, you have to rethink training entirely, I would think.
Not really.
No.
Because of the fact that, you know, we are sworn police officers. We're still getting the same interpersonal communication training, de-escalation training. Yes, we're still going to do all that, but as far as any other special training like jiu-jitsu and things of that nature?
I guess I was referring to if somebody was encountering a person and that person pulled a firearm, traditionally an officer would find cover and prepare to return fire or pin that person down and keep them from hurting someone else. Wouldn't that change at this point? Wouldn't it be to flee?
Well, pretty much. I mean, you will still have a taser. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying a taser and a gun are match. But, we're going to make sure that we can put ourselves in situations where there's a potential of a weapon being possessed by someone. We're not going to respond. We're not going to be there. Again, we don't have armed backup or armed cover there, meaning the Portland Police Bureau is going to be there to assist us.
So if something serious happens to where an officer with a gun is needed, Portland Police can be here.
Yes, they can.
But we're starting to hear concerns about response times,
right.
And we're looking at budgets down the line, and if we're going to have as many officers, we're talking about defunding Portland Police, and they've had $15 million taken away just recently. Does that change at all the way you've been thinking about this, knowing that backup might not be as readily available?
Not really, because if Portland Police respond here, it's going to be a priority one call, meaning that it's an emergency. And right now, they would drop anything they need to do to come to an emergency call. So that's not a real concern. Those calls where there's like a burglary or a crime that happened that's in the past, yes, they will not be here, but we can still investigate those ourselves because we're still police officers. But those priority one calls where we need immediate attention here at PSU, Portland Police will be here.
As we discuss all of the major issues in this country, gun violence is one of them. And one of the reasons is because a lot of Americans have access to guns. And now police are going to be engaging in a community without that weapon. What have officers said to you, or have they said anything to you about concerns for their safety or somebody's potential to be more violent toward them, knowing that they can't match them gun to gun?
First of all, it's not a very popular move. I've heard from people, especially law enforcement all over the country, who are not happy with my decision here. But I truly believe that some communities, I'm not saying this will work at Portland or OHSU or any other community or jurisdiction, municipality. I'm not saying it'll work there, but for Portland State University, I truly believe this is what we need here at Portland State. It will work here.
Did you ever think you'd make a stance like this?
I've been a cop for 32 years, and in my time, I figured I'd be retired by now. As a matter of fact, a few months ago, I was thinking about retiring before I got the job as the chief. I understand why I've been here for 32 years, because my whole career, I wanted to be a difference, make a difference in our communities. This position I'm in right now as a chief, I am making a difference. What I'm doing right now is going to change lives. So I feel very fortunate to be in this position, to be at a position in my career which I waited my whole life for, to be an influence, a huge influence on life and society. So yes.
Chief Halliburton was worried, thought maybe he'd lose some officers over this decision, but so far not a single person has left for that reason. He's actually been getting calls, he says, from new potential recruits who want to come on board, thinking this is innovative and the right plan. He says he's also been getting calls from all over the country, from other schools and universities and their police forces interested in his program and his ideas moving forward. He also says he is for defunding the police, as long as that money goes to the right places, like toward educating or empowering marginalized communities. He thinks it also needs to be a two-way street. It's got to involve both the government and the community to make it work. Of course, the issue of armed police on PSU's campus isn't new, and it's been punctuated by some high-profile police shootings, including one on campus. Maggie Vespa explained how we got here.
So how did we get here? In 2015, the Portland State Board of Trustees voted to arm campus police, joining schools like OHSU, Oregon State, and U of O that already allowed their officers to carry guns. The argument was that armed Portland police officers were already on PSU's campus, so by replacing them with armed campus officers, the school would have more control over policing, and the officers would be better trained than Portland police to interact with students. But a lot of people protested, saying PSU officers should stay gun-free, especially given the 2014 police shooting of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, among many others nationwide. Fast forward to 2018. PSU police shot and killed a man named Jason Washington on campus. Witnesses say he was trying to break up a fight, and he had a concealed carry permit, and his gun fell out of its holster and landed on the ground. When he reached to pick it up, officers shot and killed him. A grand jury ruled the shooting was justified because the officers were acting in self-defense. The calls to disarm campus police grew louder and louder. In October 2019, PSU decided to keep armed officers on campus, but added more who were unarmed. Now, following the police killing of George Floyd and national conversations about police violence and systemic racism, the school has decided to disarm campus police starting this fall. And that's how we got here.
When the story continues, a viewer asked us how much the inmates fighting Oregon fires get paid. So we found out. Plus,
a lot of people have been exposed and don't know it.
We'll tell you how to be a good Samaritan, and it can help you find out whether you've actually been exposed to COVID-19, and if you have, how your blood could be valuable. Hey there, welcome back to The Story. Lots more to talk about. So if there is something on your mind, send it our way. Message me on Facebook, email thestory@kgw.com, or use the hashtag HeyDan. We love reading what you have to say, and we love answering those questions too. I got a question, for instance, about the pandemic from Janice. Hey Dan, we are told the daily number of cases in Oregon, but is there a way to find out which COVID cases are symptomatic and which are asymptomatic? So we don't have any daily numbers on this, but the Oregon Health Authority says that right now about 75% of people who test positive report some type of symptom, so a cough or a fever or headache or anything else kind of COVID related. That means, right, do the math, 25% of those positive cases don't show any symptoms. But that doesn't quite paint the whole picture because the CDC estimates about 40% of all cases are asymptomatic. So why the discrepancy, right? 25% to 40%? Well, OHA still recommends mostly testing people who do have symptoms unless they've been exposed to someone with the disease, work in a high-risk environment, or some other factor. So it is probably safe to say that a fair amount of the asymptomatic people are just not being counted or tested in general, especially when you look at the study that came out a few weeks ago suggesting that Oregon's infection rate in June may have actually been 10 times higher than reported. And another thing, people with COVID who aren't showing symptoms can still spread it. You should probably know that by now. There have been a number of studies over the past few months that have that type of data. The good news is, from now until the end of September, finding out if you have COVID-19 antibodies is as easy as donating blood, if you are allowed to donate blood. The company BloodWorks is looking for donors. They have offices in Vancouver and Eugene. And Keely Chalmers explains what's next for those who test positive.
Doing a good deed and donating blood might be a bit more appealing these days. If you're wondering if you might have the antibodies for COVID-19, BloodWorks Northwest would like to make you an appointment. The independent nonprofit collects blood and provides it to more than 90 Northwest hospitals. And now it's focusing on plasma, specifically plasma from those who have the COVID-19 antibodies.
A lot of people have been exposed and don't know it. Probably 40 to 50% of the people who were infected with COVID-19 were infected, had a very slight illness or no illness at all, recovered, and have antibodies.
So how can your antibodies help patients suffering from the virus?
If my antibody levels are high, I can give plasma, the liquid part of my blood, and that may contain enough antibodies to help the person who's ill to get over it.
Authorization.
Just this weekend, the FDA announced it's allowing emergency use authorization for hospitals to treat COVID-19 patients with convalescent plasma, saying the benefits outweigh the risks. In an uncontrolled study, experts found promising results.
People who received the plasma early, people who received a good dose of those antibodies, the proteins that we talked about, fewer of them died.
There's a lot of promising early results and a lot of trials going on.
Dr. Donna Hansel is chair of pathology and laboratory medicine at OHSU. She says while knowing if you had COVID-19 antibodies could certainly help others, the jury is still out on how much it will help you.
We still have a long way to go to understand what those antibodies mean, if it offers any sort of protection in the future, and also how long those antibodies last.
In other words, even if you have the antibodies, keep practicing all the same precautions everyone else is. But if you want to help others struggling with COVID, donate your blood.
We're now actually stocking plasma in the Portland area, so it'll be available for you, the convalescent plasma, immediately, because that seems to be when it's best to give it.
And maybe even save a life. In Portland, Keely Chalmers, KGW News.
Hey everybody, I'm Matt. So you know the weather story today, and especially tomorrow night and into Thursday, is and will be Hurricane Laura down in the Gulf of Mexico. Let me show you the latest imagery on Laura as it churns its way across the bathtub-like waters of the Gulf itself. It is intensifying right now. It looks to me like it's becoming better organized, and there may actually be an eye beginning to form at this hour. So it is changing and developing rapidly by the hour. Here's the high-resolution imagery before it got dark there in the Gulf of Mexico. You can see those big storms kind of bubbling up towards you right there. And that's a good indication that this storm is strengthening as it moves towards us. So here's the current path projection of it right towards the border of Texas and Louisiana. Now, right now, the winds are 85 miles an hour. And I usually don't make a big deal of barometric pressure, but keep an eye on this number, the 983 millibars. We are seeing the potential for rapid intensification of Laura. And if we do, what that means is two things. You either get an increase in wind speeds of 35 miles an hour, which would make this, 120 mile an hour hurricane, or both. You see the pressure drop 24 millibars in 24 hours, which would drop that down to like the 950s, which is extremely low pressure. Now, right now it looks like it'll go up to the east of Houston, but again, we'll need to watch the track on this. And look, it even has it developing as a Category 3 as it moves inland. So this will not just be a coastal storm, as witnessed by our rainfall forecast. Look at this. Right up the gut of the Texas-Louisiana border, we're seeing 6 inches being forecast at Beaumont, 4 inches at Shreveport, but usually the model is way under forecast rainfall with tropical systems like this, so I won't be surprised if we get 12 inches of rain or more in that region. I want to show you a video of what it looked like as this passed through the Florida Keys, and it was only a tropical storm at this point, but it really was impressive. You can see the damage there. People were out running, but hopefully they were running away from the storm itself. So we can expect to see scenes like this as we go into the Gulf Coast on Thursday morning. I want to show you the storm surge forecast with this as well, because even though hurricanes are measured by their winds, it's always the water that does the most damage. And we're seeing a storm surge forecast as much as 13 feet and maybe even more as you move inland up the rivers there in the southern part of Louisiana. So the headlines on Laura look like this. Rapid intensification is possible, flooding well inland, even into Arkansas, and it may be close to the landfall that Rita made back in 2005. Everybody remembers, Dan, Hurricane Katrina from 2005, but it was followed by Rita in that southwest Louisiana area, and it was a brutal storm. So hopefully we won't see a repeat of that.
Oh, yeah, I bet. You know, with everything else going on in the country and in the world, to be in the path of one of these storms has to be stressful and a terrible thing to face. Matt,
Brutal.
Thank you. Yeah. Speaking of natural disasters, I'm sure you've seen the terrible wildfires spreading across California, but as you can see on this map here, there are actually more than a dozen fires burning in Oregon too. Fortunately, they haven't gotten too big or bad yet at this point, but a big reason for that is because all of the firefighters out there keeping them contained. Leslie sent me a question about firefighters. With all the forest fires in Oregon, I know they are using some inmate crews. How are they using them? Do they get paid? Are they actually on the fire line? We asked the Department of Corrections about this, and yeah, they do have inmates fighting forest fires. They actually deployed crews 25 times already this season, and they've got a total of 345 inmates who are trained. As for the money, they do get paid, but it is not very much. They get $6 each day that they're working on the fire. Half of that money goes into their spending account to use while in custody, and the other half goes toward their savings account for after they're released. They also get points for working, and those points are converted into money. So if an inmate works on a fire for an entire month, for instance, those added up points would bump their salary up to almost $10 a day. All right, it's almost that part of the show where we read some of your comments, answer a few questions. So pick up your phone. You can talk to me on Facebook, Instagram, email thestory@kgw.com, or use the hashtag HeyDan on Twitter. We're going to finish the story next. We had a full show tonight. I don't have a ton of time here. I'll read one comment. This one coming from Ron Quirring. I was very interested and impressed with Dan and his Hey Dan 30-minute show. However, I have become disillusioned with his reporting. This is the latest example of blatant, biased reporting, intentionally telling only part of the story, highly opinionated. Sure, it's a nice format. Thank you. Sure, he sounds like a regular guy, I think, thank you. But at the end of the day, some of us see right through the fraud. I'm no longer watching. Well, right, can you be more specific? What was the latest example? There were a lot of stories in the show. The whole thing? Tell me. I don't want to be biased. If you watch me regularly, you know that is like I'm against that more than anything. So talk to me, follow up. Let's work this out, Ron. Until tomorrow, I'll see you guys later. That's the story.